Anyway, okay, Lucas, thank you for being here today in our podcast of CSB Investing, where we're trying to learn a little bit of everything, be more growing that wealth holistically, with not just only, in health, education, but also financially. Even we as a normal people that went to college, and we coming from different backgrounds, and we just want to know more, like, why it's important to understand the financial part, right? From investing, from retirements and all that stuff. I wanted today to talk to you about crypto because you're my good friends from college. As I said, different backgrounds, architecture, science, and we still got driven to this crypto world, and it's really cool. So I just want to, if you can introduce yourself and then tell us more about how did you get started into crypto.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Lucas Stegman. I was born to a missionary family in Guyana, South America. I grew up there. Spent the first 13, 14 years of my life there. Then moved to Papua New Guinea for high school, and then back to Chicago for college, which is where I met the incredible, the wonderful Investica Mariana. Um, And I would say that financial literacy wasn't a central part of my upbringing. My parents weren't they weren't wealthy by any stretch. They didn't actively manage their finances, short of the typical types of um, putting together your taxes, contributing to your 401ks, all that sort of stuff. But it wasn't, I wouldn't say by any stretch front and center in my family life growing up, and I don't necessarily think that that was a terrible thing. Everybody has a different story when it comes to that sort of stuff. So, um, I I remember during college, during the 2017 bull run, starting to pay attention. As Bitcoin hit the news, probably a similar story to many people. Um, there's this Euphoria phase where all these news headlines are flying around. You just think, I wonder what this thing is, and it's sort of in the back of your head. And then, of course, it reaches a peak, and then takes a nosedive, and then you're like, well, I guess that was that,
Mm.
and so then it's a couple more years, and then it comes back around. I remember thinking at the time, at least to the degree that I understood it, which was very, very superficially. I remember thinking that it was going to be big, but I wasn't
Mhm.
really in a position to um, wasn't in a financial position to really start investing at that point. As I can imagine, many people aren't very financially stable when they're in college, to say the least. So yeah, fast forward a couple of years when I graduated,
Mhm.
uh, moved down to Atlanta to start up a job, and then we started sort of the next cycle, and I decided to, once I had a few extra bucks on the sidelines, that I wanted to figure out how to put that to
Mhm.
work. And I started off with stocks, and I it was very, very short lived. I would say my dalliance with the stock market. Um, I maybe spent 2 months in the stock market before I think
Which
basically deciding that that was not, yeah, that was not for me, and I made the switch over to crypto. And I think, in all honesty, I think that most people, when they first come to crypto, it's about the returns, especially during the
Mhm.
good times. Most people think, hey, why would I stay in the stock market for a 8% return year over year on index funds? And then, here's my nephew over here, who put $5 in in the Bitcoin, and now he's a couple $100. So like, what am I doing with my life? Um, but then, I think it really blossomed for me into an interest, and then eventually into um, more of an engagement, I would say, with the content, with the topics. and with the principles behind the
Mhm.
technology, because it is a technology. Money
Mhm.
itself is a technology, and
Mhm.
Bitcoin is cryptocurrency in general is the next evolution of that technology. And so it's a way of it also provides the normal people, as you say, people just like you and me, entry into a very lucrative time period. I always
Mhm.
think it's incredible that we have this opportunity. Really, if you think about it, there's no it's unprecedented to be able to get in kind of at the ground floor of a transformation of this scale. And so
Mhm.
I think it's important to become savvy about that, and to the degree that you're able to
Mhm.
participate in it, to learn it, um, because I think it will set you up for a very of course there's ways to lose money, there's ways to make money, all that stuff,
Mhm.
but the underlying technology itself is very sound, and it'll be around um, for a good while to come, and it'll only get much more prevalent. And of course, most people think. Well, I'll hold off until I can pay for my coffee at Starbucks with Bitcoin, and then I'll get in. I'll
Yeah,
hold
yeah.
on until I can see more of the infrastructure built out. So
Mhm.
it's less risky at that point. And
Mhm.
while that's true, it's also the case that at that point it's mostly too late. The kinds of returns that we're talking about, the kinds of life changing returns, really aren't. They're not found at that point of adoption, at that point
Mhm.
in the adoption curve. So
It's
it's
like the
important.
internet area as well.
Exactly. Yeah, it's important to get in. Um, Not financial advice, of course, as they always say, but
Yep.
it's important to take rational risks, I would say,
Mhm.
and to know that you're not going to be um, that risk is correlated with reward, and
Yep.
there's no way that you can get one without the other. So if you want the kind of returns, you got to take the risk, and you have to be willing to take the heat. And we're in a, I don't have to tell people that we've been in a real past couple of months. It's been a real roller coaster. So it's no
It's no joke.
it's top of mind, I would say, for most people that yeah, nothing is guaranteed. But the more that you're able to sort of dip your toes, get started down that rabbit hole. I think that it's even the technological side of things, even
Mhm.
the development side of things, even the fundamental side of things. It's worth looking into because, of course, the build outs are happening whether the price is going up or down.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
it's not like the developers just sort of give up when the price is in the red and just say, well,
Right.
the heck with there's ongoing development at all
Mhm.
times, basically on all of these projects. And so it's worth keeping up on that, keeping up to date with what's going on in your favorite projects. And that way
Mhm.
you're able to really sort of front run the
Mhm.
next leg.
It's kind of interesting what Lucas you were saying about your background, right? Like our families probably just in the traditional tribe of the financial part of like being safe, save the money, to put it aside, put it under the mattress. I don't know, putting a saving account at 0.01%. And there's nothing wrong with that. But then we can see the different generations, right? That's our generations of our parents, that's what they got taught from their parents of what it was happening throughout that time. And then in our generation of millennials, Gen X or all those no names ¿verdad? That we just say to each other, basically we just like is one student debt here in the United States. For people that listen to from everywhere in United States, it's like it's insane, the student debt. I didn't even know that you had that. When I came to the States understanding that, I was like, wow. And 18 years old, they're allowed to take one of the most important decisions of their lives is to get into undergrad with a huge amount of debt and not explaining any financial, like education of like what consequence and repercussions you will have afterwards, when you actually get a job, if you get a job. Because um Lucas is a great example. He got a job, I was able to get a job, and then able to sustain that. But some of our friends or colleagues, they're in a different area because they couldn't find a job. So just realizing that our system is not even teaching us about this education, like what is a student debt, what is a good debt, what is a bad debt, what is investing, in stock markets, long, short term. Is so important to just to start learning. My sister's right now in high school. Well, she just finished and she's about to start at the university, and she wants to come to the States. I'm like, well, before let's think about this, right? What
Mm.
career do you want to really get into a student debt if that's what you want? 18, and I think even us in our own career, we start realizing that we also we have other passions, right? Like we don't have to marry one specific career for the rest of life. We can also do a little bit of everything and be fulfilled with that. So it's really interesting what you said about just start learning, and like even what we hear in the news is not just about, hey, I heard that Bitcoin is a scam. No, just go first. Okay, Bitcoin's a scam. Start Googling why is a scam. And then little by little challenge yourself with those questions and like what people are, supposedly saying about the technology of Bitcoin or the cryptocurrency, and then start learning. So I think this is you Lucas, is you're a great example of that. It's like you're in a different area, but then you start hearing about it and you start just learning. So that's great. I just like a question. Another question for you was why cryptocurrency as a whole? Like, what brought you, to your attention? Not just for the return of investment, as you were saying, but also as the whole ecosystem, right? Because one thing is the stocks, you buy each company, but then cryptocurrency, you have different projects. But what are the principles or the key aspects of cryptocurrency that brings you, to your attention, and you see a future on it, like compared to, other type of traditional investments?
Hmm. Great question. Yeah, I think that to piggyback off what you said earlier too, most of the time, um, you'll hear, especially these large sort of titans of finance, the old guard. You'll get Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or
Hmm.
Jamie Dimon or wherever they say, "Man, you shouldn't worry about this sort of stuff." Um, and the thing is, they can say that, right? Because they're billionaires and they're going to be fine. There's no problem for them. Um, so they're already very well established. And hey, more power to them. They gamed the system and made it work for them, and that's
Hmm.
no shade there. But for someone in their position to tell someone in our position that is a very it's a very actually quite malicious thing to do, because what it strips us at the bottom of is the ability to build wealth at an like I was saying, kind of at an unprecedented time in this transition to a decentralized financial system.
Hmm.
Normally, you just don't get this kind of an opportunity. The vast majority of history has been people sort of um, born into a time period where there are defined parameters to the financial system, and that's 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 all they had the opportunity to participate in, and it really is the opportunity is really remarkable. And it's like I said too, it's not just about the returns, it's not just about the gains, it's not just about the bags, it's about the generalized principles of the technology. It's about the democratization of the ability um, to store your wealth at at a very in a way that doesn't get eaten away by things like inflation, or hey, even better,
Hmm.
if you're actually in a deflationary currency where you're able to um, to build up to build up your finances even without investing them even further. And that too is, we've been sort of sold the lie by the economic system that inflation is a good thing, at least in moderation. 2-3% is
Hmm.
fine. And that's good because it incentivizes spending and all that sort of stuff. But what that really means is that it actually compounds, in the way that interest compounds. And so if you look at the value of the dollar, especially over the course of the 20th century, it's remarkable that we put up with it as a society, right? The absolute theft that's going on at the level of government really is quite it's quite spectacular, and the way that we have sort of just said, well, we roll our eyes and say, oh, those guys in Washington taking the value. But the thing is that it's one thing if you don't have an alternative. It's one thing if you just think, well, what can I do? You just sort of throw up your
Mhm.
arms and there they go again, stealing my money. But if you have an alternative, it is your prerogative and responsibility to vote with your dollars and say, man, I'm out,
Yeah.
and more power to you for doing so, because it's an indication to the powers that be that we're not just ants to be trampled with these incredible bureaucratic juggernauts that have no interest in preserving our financial um, our financial coffers. And the
Mhm.
more that you the more that you the more that you realize that and sort of take things into your own hands and say, I'm not putting up with that anymore. And then you see numbers come out like this year, for instance, with 8%, seven and a
Mhm.
half percent, and even those
Exactly.
numbers, they're sort of rose colored, because that's only a
Yeah.
certain amount of goods. And then you think, well, so that year after year, and of course they're saying, well, it's temporary and it'll come back down. It's kind of this anomalous, COVID occurrence.
Mhm.
All of that stuff. It's like, well, even if it comes back down to 2-3%, why would I bother if I have the alternative to, be in a deflationary currency, and have the benefit of decentralization on top of that? I think one of
Mhm.
the things that's come out, especially recently, is the principle
Mhm.
of decentralization has sort of come to a head, especially in in relation to financing movements that you find to be compelling, that are
Mhm.
sort of anathema to the powers that be, especially in the case of something like the truckers' protests in Canada ongoing at the
Mhm.
moment. Um,
Wow, that's
there's
entire story.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another test case for how you might, if you want to fund people, if you want to demonstrate that you're in support of a movement, and then you say,
Mhm.
well, hey, you take the standard avenues for fundraising, and it's like Patreon or
Mhm.
crowdfunding, whatever that
GoFundMe, yeah.
may
Mhm.
be. Yeah, and then the government comes in and says, hey, actually, you know what? it's
You cannot
it's
receive it.
really quite extraordinary that the government has the tenacity to decide, actually, we're just going to prevent you from privately fundraising. It almost I'm almost glad that it happened, because as
Yeah.
ridiculous and crazy as it is, it brings all these ideas to a head, and you start to think they shouldn't have that ability. That's
And
not
how
what.
the government can flip, right, so easily, because Canada is supposedly progress country, where support most of they have the first ETFs, Bitcoin ETFs are being Canada and all that, and then see the government coming in completely flipping, in this huge issue that, controversial most of, from like the people, like the community and the government. And as you're saying, so a clear example of what the government can do, even there are progress, like government. And out of nowhere, it's like, if me as the government, we don't have the control, then we're not allowing anyone else to have it. So that's
Mhm,
where I agree with you. It's like a great example of like how, you know tomorrow the United States can flip and can censor all our I don't know accounts. And it's like, what do we do?
mhm. Well, and
Going with
and
your
you know,
time.
50 years ago, you'd be totally forgiven for saying, "Yeah, what can we do?" Because you couldn't do anything, right? But yeah, as soon as the alternative presents itself, you should not only say, "Well, now I actually have an alternative, but I have the if I believe in some of these principles, if I think that, you know that really shouldn't be something that is given to them as the authority to do, then yeah, you have a responsibility as the governed populace. It's supposed to be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, right? And here they say, well, actually, we're not that at all, and you know, we do what
Exactly.
we want, basically, and there's nothing you can do about it, except now we have the opportunity to say, well, as it just so happens, there is something we can do about it.
Mhm.
And it's a way of I think of reminding um, the government, along with it's not just government overreach too. It's big tech overreach as well in the censoring sectors. It's centralized authority general as a general principle. I think is the idea of sort of removing the power from the hands of a very small number of people, and giving it back to the people. It's a really yeah, it's a principle of
Mhm.
democratization of
Right.
the fundamental form of value transfer, which is again it's mind-boggling to really even think of, because yeah, for the longest time it wasn't within your ability to determine an alternative. It was just sort of you dealt with the currency that you were given. And
Mhm.
I think the free market of currency is really sort of opening up to people. And you think, well, if value is the underlying determinant of goods and services, then it's far more important that we sort of take back control of that than the actual production
Mhm.
of the rest of the
Exactly.
economy.
Absolutely. No. And now that you're putting this example, current example, which is great, um, for me, is we also were talking about inflation, right? And just talking to my family back in Costa Rica, and just like here in the United States, everything's super expensive, right? Like here in California, $5 gallon gas is like insane. Like the food, like the like the needs, like the normal needs, is just like way out of our proportion. Yeah, $100 we basically spend it, for like three, four, five things in the grocery, and then we now went from like I was able to afford $75 all my groceries for week 2 weeks, and now it's like $200. So it's just like in the little things is where people that haven't been educating themselves in the financial, the economics of what's going on in the world, they're finally seeing it in their own, pockets. It's like, what's going on?
Mhm.
People that didn't want to talk about finance, they didn't want to talk about investing or other alternatives. Now they're realizing that the system is screwing us up right now. And because some people learn by themselves, like us, we find a way to go look, and understand alternatives. Other people have to start living it and then say, shit, I need to do something. And then those people, friends that never wanted to talk about finance, or even just it's a very sensitive topic, they're like, I need to do something else because my savings are pretty much all gone through the pandemic, because when I was out of job or different situations, I had to use them. Then I had more expenses. Everything is more expensive. So people are finally realizing that we need an alternative. And as you said, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin is one of them, right? There are different projects, but it's definitely given us like, okay, there's still hope even in this chaotic world right now. I think that's, for me, the key of crypto, right now. It's like, I will say I'm pouring dollars in crypto. I'm pretty much crypto now. And it's just crazy because every time that I talk to someone like you or other friends or people that are knowledgeable on different topics, it just reaffirm me. Even we're in a bearish, volatile time, who cares, right? Because at the end is, you see the average movement of Bitcoin, of Ethereum, that right is like way more than over 20%. I'm just gonna talk conservative, right? Every year it's just like, okay, I might as well. If tomorrow goes down and up again, over year, we're gonna be okay in that sense, as you're saying. And they're still building and working in the technology in the back end, So for me, it's hope. That's what brings me, crypto right now. Like, that someday we all can take control our own finance, help each other out. You said donate to the cause that I want, to the movement that I want, that I believe. And at the end, it's like governments, yeah, they should be around, but then it's like, please, like, also us as a people, we need some type of our own control of our own lives. We cannot be just, telling someone telling us all the time what to do, because it, we get people with mental health, depression. Like right now we're in that, I don't know, like right there, like we have been told the past 2 3 years everything, how we gotta, how we were gonna work, where are we gonna go work, what we need to buy, how far apart we gotta be. We have become so isolated to each other that even now, with these examples in different countries, which is a reality, also now our money as well. How do we need to spend and how we're gonna do it? So I hope with crypto, it keeps bringing up that hope for all of us. For you, Lucas, if so, crypto right now is like a big thing worldwide. You were explaining me back in the days, like the key of energy and like how we can transfer money value through Bitcoin. Could you explain us some of that? Because I think you had a really good example of that. And then talking about this hope of moving into like our reality, to like getting more to know this world. So I don't know if you can explain a little more on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes back to the idea that cheap energy is really at the crux of raising people out of poverty, eliminating poverty, basically. So the faster that you can get energy to developing countries, then the faster that you'll be able to ameliorate the suffering and the poverty that exist in those countries. Poverty is not the only source of suffering, but it's suffice it to say it's a huge source of premature deaths and all different types of um, government corruption. Uh,
Mhm.
so it's really important to understand the premise of the communication of energy as a means to um, as a means to help bring people, to help lift people in developing countries all over the world out of their poverty, as well as
Mhm.
at the same time limiting our carbon emissions, right? Because the by far the most dangerous form of energy in fuel, well, not the most dangerous. There's radioactive forms of energy that are a little bit more dangerous, but in terms of health and emissions, wood is very costly to the environment, as well as the respiratory systems of people that burn open fires indoors, that sort of thing. Um,
Mhm.
Coal is slightly better, but still not that much better. Oil is very energy dense, which is why it's sort of taken this industry standard place in the modern economy as a cheap way of generating energy. But the problem with oil is that you have to drill it and you have to transport it, right? Because it's a physical resource. So if I'm drilling oil
Matter.
up
Mhm.
off the coast of Norway, and my market is in Texas, then I need to ship that oil. I need to get that oil from those rigs down to the market where I anticipate selling it. So there's not only the emissions in the actual drilling of the oil and the destruction of the habitat there, but then also the emissions of the transportation, and then the emissions of the actual eventual consumption of the oil itself as it creates energy. Um,
Mhm.
there's been a recent resurgence of interest in nuclear technology, especially fusion reaction,
Mhm.
which is definitely long overdue, in my personal opinion. I think we're still sort
Yep.
of in the age of uh,
Oxygen
Chernobyl fever,
failures. Yeah.
where we think, man, nuclear the it's really more of a PR problem than anything else. People just think of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and Chernobyl and Fukushima and all these places where it's like, but in terms of death per unit of energy created, it's far far safer than oil. And so
Compared
the
the
sooner we can
oil.
get
Yeah.
yeah, the sooner we can get there, the better. But then coming back to Bitcoin, one of the fundamental, most interesting, and I think world changing principles of a really a proof of work blockchain is that it's a way of transporting energy for the cost of an internet connection, basically. So it's not a form of it's not it's a form of purchasing power as energy. It's not energy itself. You can't cook your food with Bitcoin, but what you can do is you can buy on the ground whatever you need to cook your food with Bitcoin. You know, and so for instance, you can transfer the cheap electricity costs for somewhere that has incredible hydroelectric resources at their disposal, say on the ground in China somewhere, and you can get them mining their they get their mining operations there, so that they're actually doing the mining with relatively cheap energy, and then you can transmit that unit of purchasing power that's been paid for at the price of a much lower energy cost to mine. You can transmit that to a market in the States or in Europe or in South America, for instance, at the cost of an
Mhm.
internet connection. And so there's no shipping costs. You don't have any of the infrastructure required to actually transport that energy. Once it's mined on site, you can send that purchasing power to places that have much higher costs of energy. And
Mhm.
it's really a way of you don't need any wires, you don't need any pipes, you don't need any besides the already extant
Internet, yeah. Yeah.
internet infrastructure that we already have. So it really transforms the way in which we really even think about the what's necessary for the communication of purchasing power and value transfer.
That's great. Well, that's it. Just makes more sense, right? Because people, one of the things that are criticizing is a lot of, like, climate change with Bitcoin, like, all that. But then, as you're saying, like, if you compare the other consequence of this other type of energies, that how it get produced, and like the labor in it, and then also the emissions that they create. So one example, I'm just easy here. El Salvador are connecting their volcanic, energy, into the minery to do by Bitcoin or hydroelectric. So there's definitely renewable systems that we can use to do that minery, like, and mining, and then from that transfer to anywhere in the world. So I mean, and we still start seeing to open, like, a lot of them are moving to Texas. I know they're like already. Do you know what renewals they use, or they're still in the process of finding that out? I don't know if you know in Texas,
The
because a lot.
renewable
Yeah, if they use any renewals, do you know, in Texas?
Well, I'm not sure specifically which mining operation that you're talking about, but Texas is infamous for very low cost energy. But it's mainly because of the amount of
Solar.
oil, oil infrastructure, especially related
Oh.
to um, um, just the amount of natural resources in the form of fossil fuels that are in Texas. I mean, there's huge refineries in most of the major cities in Texas, and there's
Mm.
just fewer transportation related costs with getting cheap energy in Texas as opposed to some place um, like Florida, for instance, or somewhere in the Northeast. So it's and they're also their regulations are a lot more friendly to that sort of stuff. Texas is
Mhm.
infamously more libertarian when it comes to their
Mhm.
taxation structures, their corporate leniencies. So yeah, it's no wonder that
Mhm.
they're sort of spearheading the
Welcoming. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. I had another question also related to Bitcoin, but so what do you? I know Bitcoin is like the number one. That's the one we've been talking about. Do you have some type of knowledge in Ethereum? What do you think of Ethereum as the second, like, token in the whole cryptocurrency? And what do you think about it? I know there's some good things and some issues still about gas fees and all that, but do you think like the technology itself is able to solve this decentralization of finance? So I don't know if you wanna just dip a little bit on that.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Ethereum. I'm definitely much heavier into Ethereum than Bitcoin at the moment, and I think that was partly a function of me just sort of for the first year, basically when I got into crypto in earnest, I spend like the first 10-15 minutes of the day, um, probably more than I should have, on CoinMarketCap looking at the trending projects, and I made tons of different watch lists, micro caps and large caps and everything in between, and I would I would basically, look into which ones, what they're doing, which projects are doing what, and if I could see a use case for those. And I think that that's really important, especially when you're first getting started, to just get a general sort of read on the market, like what's going on in the development space, because yeah, Bitcoin is really just the tip of the iceberg. Although it commands, the
Yeah.
majority of the market share. In terms of the actual technology and the development side of things, it's just one piece to the puzzle. So there are quite a few different projects that are extremely promising, that are a little bit lower down the list. So I made the mistake of going probably a little bit too deep into the deep dark altcoin forest initially, but it's worth it just to get a sense of the extent of the cryptosphere, as it were. And I think what I started to realize related to Ethereum is that, based on the programmability of Ethereum, based on the platform, based on the
Mhm.
technology, um,
Mhm.
there was much more development happening on the Ethereum side. There were much more projects being built on the Ethereum blockchain, for obvious reasons. I mean, it's more flexible in so many different ways. And so I started to realize that it's worth investing in infrastructure. And I think that Ethereum is the infrastructure for a lot of different projects. Um, in a way that, suppose you were to invest in a project that was built on Ethereum, that you had to pay the gas fees in Ethereum. Um, it would make more sense to me to invest in sort of the hub and spokes approach of just looking at, well, Ethereum is sort of the hub to all these different projects and spokes.
Mhm.
So I'd rather be heavier in that infrastructure itself, because all these different projects are sort of built on it and use it. So if you invest in one of the spokes, it's kind of like, well, it may be there in a couple of years, may not, but the core is going to stay, if not grow exponentially as all these different projects come online. So that was the approach that I kind of took. I mean, besides the fact that Vitalik Buterin he's just an alien. He's different in all kinds of ways. Yeah, as soon as you hear the guy open his mouth, you know that he's probably one of the smartest individuals to uh, to walk the face of the earth. Um, of course, that comes along with its own idiosyncrasies, and he can be quite
Right.
a fun from time to time. But the amount of, especially if you read his blog, the amount of insight that he has into the 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 technology itself is really remarkable. For someone his age, and he's so prescient. He's so extraordinarily farsighted, and for
Mhm.
somebody like that to be at the forefront of developing a project is it's really saying something. There are lots of criticisms of Ethereum that
Mhm.
are perhaps merited, um,
Mhm.
and perhaps not. That, especially when you compare Bitcoin and Ethereum as proof of work versus proof of stake, there can be there's a lot of vitriol that goes along with that in the community, of people saying, well, you need to be sort of ride or die with one or the other, and
Mm.
you'd be
Maximalism.
disingenuous you know to have investments in both, and you're a cheater. You're a embarrassment to the community. But I think that's really toxic, and frankly, it just gets too divisive at the grassroots level. We need to present a unified front, and it's certainly the
So
case
true.
for me. The benefit of without getting into the proof of work versus proof of stake, the benefit of the programmability that Ethereum is developing, um,
Mhm.
is that, well, there's so many implementations of it. The first one that comes to mind for me um, is taxes. And I think that so many of the problems that we have in countries today is that our taxes are not attached whatsoever to what they're spent on. We pay a specific percentage of our income, um,
Mhm.
and our investments on to the government, and they decide how that's spent. And
You.
and we
Mhm.
don't get any say beyond what we contribute. And
Mhm.
that, frankly, is very it's totally backwards um, because it essentially means that you presume that the government knows what
What?
what to do with your money better than you do. Um, and I'm like, if you were to really get me going on taxes, I'd probably say that they shouldn't be there at all. That we should source that from the ground level ourselves.
Hmm.
In the same way that lots of social services way back in the day
Maybe
were
we
provided.
can have another conversation about that because I think that's also interesting. And
Yeah,
that's, yeah, absolutely. But I understand where you're coming from, and I think we have the similar
yeah. I mean,
mindset
it's
in that.
worth taking a step back and thinking how revolutionary would it be for you to say, look, I'll pay my damn taxes, I'll pay my whatever it is, but
Hmm.
you can't spend it on these garbage black box initiatives that I don't know where it's going. I don't know what it's paying for. There's no accountability there. You know, look,
Hmm.
you can get me to pay my taxes. I'll concede that. I'll pay my damn taxes.
Right. Do
You
my
have to allow
duties. Yeah.
people to say you can't spend this money on something that I disagree with at a fundamental value based level. Um,
True.
and I think that it's going to tether politics to its constituency in a way that hasn't been the case for a very long time. We need to have that sort of
Hmm.
that lever to be able to adjust to say, look, you don't get to spend this on whatever you think deserves it. You have
Based
to
on
be
your
putting
agenda.
to be
Hmm.
putting this money towards the things that the taxpayer values, and that will
Hmm.
be able to, I think, really transform in some fundamental ways the relationship between government and the governed.
Absolutely. No, and that this is one of the use cases, right? That the loans crypto as well. I know you know a little of that. What do you, if you can expand on that? Because I think I'm learning so much from you in that sense. um, right now you said like in the government accountability with each other. Then also like loans, like what do you, what is the main difference between crypto loans and the normal loans nowadays? I don't know if you can explain a
Mm.
little bit of that. Hmm.
Well,
Or they're pretty much the same.
it, there's a lot of different kinds of crypto loans out there, and I'd caution the uninitiated investor to instantly bet the family farm and take out a loan on because you can actually there are some projects out there that will give you a sizable loan very under collateralized. It's essentially leverage trading with a very high leverage, and all that really means is that your liquidation point is very close to your entry. And so,
Liquidation.
yeah, if you take out a under collateralized loan,
Hmm.
of course the collateralization ratio is really the crux of the point here. It's very important to pay attention to what that is, because that's going to
Hmm.
tell you, if you take out a loan at this price point and the price starts to go up and then it goes down and it passes sort of your entry point and goes down, you sort of have to be concerned with, all right, where am I going to be required to contribute additional collateral? And then, because usually they'll warn you, usually the projects will warn you about, all right, your loan is getting close to your liquidation point. If you don't contribute additional collateral and it reaches the liquidation point, we liquidate
Your entire.
your investment there. So it's you have to be careful, because especially with liquidation cascades that happen in crypto, that can happen in a very short period of time if you're not paying attention to, we've had wicks that 15-20% wicks in a single day, and if you're not on it, if you're at work doing whatever you're doing and you're not paying attention,
You're
you get home at the
showering
end of
and
the day,
just like
and
no.
exactly, it's a terrible, terrible feeling.
Hmm.
And it's probably worth feeling that one or two times, especially at the beginning, but make sure that you're feeling that with a very small amount of money overall, right? So that you can learn those lessons um,
Hmm.
without losing everything, because
Right.
otherwise you're in a terrible position to get back in. You want to be able to like my strategy for loans. And there are other things
Hmm.
like flash loans too, which I haven't actually been able to really think about make use of. But the premise behind a flash loan is that if you can figure out a way to reallocate that capital um, in a way that, so you essentially take the loan, you send it to
Mm-hmm.
somebody, they do something with it that generates profit with it, and then send the principal plus profit back to you. If that can all happen within the same contract execution, you can take out basically anything you want because
Wow.
it's like a guaranteed it's a guaranteed transaction because all of that is happening within the same within the same contract
Amount
execution.
time.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's very low risk if you can figure out how to use it. Because like most of the time, people make use of loans by they'll take out a loan from the bank, they'll put it to work. Maybe they'll invest in real estate, maybe they'll start a business, whatever it is, and then the bank is essentially charging interest to cover its risk in loaning you the original money to begin with, the original
Mm-hmm.
principal. And so it takes there's a factor of time involved there that
Right.
essentially exponentially increases the risk of the whole transaction. But with flash loans, it's really just there's no risk involved. But the thing is, you have to be able to you have to either be a programmer yourself or really understand a way of making money work in a circular way that you're able to actually generate profit from the same transaction. You have to be able to generate to formulate the transaction in a way that moves the
Mm-hmm.
money to create profit and then return to the original loan to the original person that gave you the loan,
Right.
all within the same process. I haven't managed to figure out a way to
Yeah,
make use
but
of that.
definitely can.
Potential.
Yeah, no, for sure, it has some potential, and I'm just thinking about like a really good business, right? Like creates cash flow at the same time, and then, as you said, like finding that business and then do that type of thing. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. I will research more about it for sure. Another use case is staking. I think you come to the loan part, but I mean we can expand each one of them eventually in another conversation. But just I wanna like people have like a quick, hey, overview of like what is DeFi or decentralization finance, and then the different uses that there are, so you guys can go research around. So like staking, I think that's one of the, like I love the most, and I'm personally doing a lot of staking in different coins. What are your thoughts on that, and if you can expand the concept of staking?
Sure. Yeah. So staking is essentially a way of well, different projects can have slightly different implementations of staking, but it's a way of locking up collateral in a project in a way that either helps to validate the transactions that are occurring on chain, but it also helps the stability of the underlying currency because you're taking supply out of circulation and locking it up in validation basically. And so you can imagine that if you have all of the currency of a project completely liquid, then it's a little bit more risky because hypothetically everybody could dump all their coins all at once and it would tank the price totally. But
Hmm.
if you have like 50% of the coins, the circulating supply locked up in validation or staking, then at least it cuts some risk off the table, right? Because then you're thinking, well, they're locked, and so people aren't going to be able to dump them if there ends up being this sort of cascade of selling taking place.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's a way of securing proof of stake chains as well as well as ensuring that the price stability is a little bit more reasonable, as
Right.
reasonable as it can be within crypto. Um,
Crypto.
so I think that it's worth. I've staked in a couple of different projects, and some of them I've found haven't actually performed in the way that in the way that they purported to. That I wasn't actually making money, or in the same way that we say after taxes, it wasn't actually a profitable endeavor. For me, like it would be after gas fees, it wasn't profitable. Because
Right.
you'd have to stake, and then you would have to I was staking synthetics for a long time, and
Mm-hmm.
essentially with that, the assumption going in is that they you send them your coins, you lock up your coins in their contract, and then they basically just send you rewards based on that principle on a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that you have to, if those aren't substantial enough, based on the percentage return on the principal, then you might actually at the end of the day be losing money because it requires a certain number of transaction fees to actually to claim the staking rewards, or to actually reconvert them back into, because some
Mm-hmm.
staking will actually into transfer the original, the native coin into a like
Right.
a wrapped version, or like a whatever the token is, X or something. So they do this like sleight of
Mm-hmm.
hand. They'll change it so that in order to actually withdraw, you have to change it back and pay the gas on that. Um, which, depending on the time of day that you do that, that can fluctuate dramatically, and so you may still be able to break even or even be profitable on it.
To add
Certain
in that, just really
what?
quick to add in that, for me, I think you're doing more through like the MetaMask, like actual, right, like decentralization, buying the coins. I've
Mm,
been doing more in like crypto.com, or
yeah, yeah,
that's where I have it mostly, and like, which is just the bank, right? Like already a centralized platform, which ultimately you shouldn't be having all your coins there, but then for easy transaction or doing those rewards, it makes sense. I have a percentage of my portfolio there, which ultimately is just for staking, right? So that percentage right there, I all the accounts in staking, and it's an easy way, I think, than the way you're doing it, Lucas, maybe, because
well,
yes,
it's certainly
they charge us fee, right? They charge us fees for
yeah,
buying in and transacting, but not as like the gas fees yet, because we're on the platform.
there's
Hmm.
a certain economy of scale that you get from platforms like that they're able to be profitable because of the sheer scale that they're staking at. And
Hmm.
so you can get a cut of that based on your contribution to that staking pool. So
Hmm.
it's definitely more accessible, and I think there has to be a place for that, because most people,
Hmm.
I think we delude ourselves when we think that most people are going to want to learn how to how to do all of the more complex operations that happen at the level of
The back end, yeah, buying the
individual
bit.
platform staking and that sort of stuff. It's it's much easier, and this is why people have been pushing so hard for an ETF. Is just we need to drop the barrier to entry to traditional investors in a way that
Mhm.
they're able to gain exposure to the asset class, while at the same time, it, because I think that the biggest barrier to entry is really just that it's really just a time frame. It's like
Mhm.
as soon as you get some skin in the game, you go down the rabbit hole. You start reading all these articles. You start paying attention to the market. You start understanding and appreciating the
Mhm.
potential
Mhm.
in the asset class. And so it's really it's sort of like it's like a it's like a sale offer. We want to be able to say, come, get your toes wet, and then we win you over, right? Once you have a little bit of an exposure to it, then you start doing the research,
Marketing, yeah.
start figuring it out, and then you get a little bit more concerned with, hey, maybe, uh,
Well,
maybe,
I gotta bring this to like the stock market really quick, because before I had no also background in financing, like investing in general back in Costa Rica, back in the days. It's just really hard to say, hey, I'm investing in the stock market in United States. Like you have to go behind, like figure
yeah,
out the banks, how to open accounts, how to do the taxes. So it's definitely not easy. So when I started working, then I finally was able to start learning and hearing that people you should invest. I'm like, okay, how? Then I start finding out that all these different banks, but there's huge transactions. So every trade they cost $5. If I buy a stock of $5, then it's just a lot of money. So at that time, transition from being a student to being in the workforce. workplace, yeah, I didn't have as much money. So it's like I can't invest just yet, or some minimums of $2,000, 3,000. So, and I know this is like Robinhood doesn't have much reputation anymore as used to, but I think they brought that innovation, democratization of investing, for all of us, like the normal people. That is like we don't have to worry these huge fees, these huge, you know fees in trading, but more than understanding what is investing, how to buy and sell stocks, how to hold and keep the statement of the taxes. So that was like an amazing learning experience. When crypto gets to that point, I think it's going to be way easier, because now all our people of our age, the 20s, 30s, they're now investors, right, in their own way. Some people are just doing Dogecoin and GameStop, but some people are really making their life, from investing, because I'm one of them. It's like it changed completely my mindset of like this is easy. Then after that, I open other accounts, Roth IRA, all these different ones. And now that's what I'm seeing right now with crypto, right? As you were saying, now the Super Bowl last week, barcode of Coinbase. People are like, what the hell is going on? Or the FTX commercials. So these platforms are already user friendly. The fees are still really high for me, for my perspective, that we know others, but it's really putting them out there for the retail. And it's like, this is easy, or we talk about Venmo, PayPal, these other institutions are already here, promoting this. So I think we are early adopters, but now the adoption is happening little by little. And I think the same marketing as what's happening in the world, we talk about the Canada situation right now, or others, even the pandemic, when we didn't even have access to banks or anything, when we're in like a curfew, or we had to stay at home. Then just realize that I need access to my money, I need access to all these different stuff. So I think finally it's coming, and little by little, and I don't know if you want to add something to that, Lucas.
Well, yeah, you brought up a lot of different stuff there, and it sort of covering a lot of ground. But one thing I'll say about the Robinhood stuff is that,
Mhm.
nobody's going to take that away from Robinhood, that they really democratized the stock market in a way that hadn't been done before. Um,
Mhm.
and like you said, they've sort of fallen on tough times, reputationally speaking, in the past couple
Mhm.
of months, especially, and years following the GameStop and the AMC craze and all that stuff, where it turned out actually, hey, I want to be able to sell, but I can't, certain things. Or
Mhm.
I think it's worth, especially in the traditional markets, it's worth realizing that if it seems, their payment for order flow model was a little bit, it was a little bit deceptive in its promises, and most of the time it worked, right? Because
Mhm.
you think, well, it I need, for the average retail investor, I can't be paying these commission fees, and so I need essentially commissionless trading in order to
Mhm.
participate at all. And Robinhood came in and said, hey, we can do that for you, but there's a price to be paid. And that
Mhm.
price was sort of, it was hidden for a while. People were like, wait a minute, how is this happening? But hey, I won't bite the hand that feeds me. Basically, I'm fine.
Mhm.
Um, but then, the mask came off, and people figured out, oh, so this is the price to be paid for that. And, to
So
each
it's
their own.
like,
If
yeah.
if you're willing to pay that price, then, more power to you. And yeah, you're not going to hear me
Mhm. Mhm.
rant on people that do that. But it's worth noting that, there usually is some magic happening behind the scenes of something like that, and it'll come out, likely in ways that you wish that it wouldn't. Right? If you're trying to sell
Right.
when all the stuff is dumping and you can't, and you're all
That's
in, it's a bad deal, right? And you would have liked
Yes,
to say,
yes.
well, they weren't transparent with us up front, like I I should be able to sue them or whatever. But all of
Mhm.
that stuff is in the fine print of the contract when you consent and you agree and all that stuff. Of course, nobody reads that when they sign on, because who's going to read that? So it's a 99-page legal document that you wouldn't understand even if you did read all the way through. So there's all these there's all these technicalities that you just think, can we just simplify this and get down
Mhm.
to peer-to-peer transaction of value where I can send as much as I want to you and you receive it without any intermediary. And the thing is, for the longest time, it just wasn't possible. We didn't have the technology, you know? And so even to think about this, it would be like, well, yeah, that would be nice, but
And you fly
how
to
would we do
Atlanta
it?
right now.
Right, exactly. And so that was really the genius of the original Bitcoin light papers, just to say, actually, guys, we have the technology now to do this, and it was formulated in such a concise and really elegant way. People are like, wait a minute, we do. And since we've entered the digital age, we need a monetary system that's commensurate with that, and that takes advantage of all the unique advantages that offers.
So we can transfer money from Earth to Mars in the future. Just
Yeah. Well, what's weird is
you
like
never know.
the fiat standard. The, the fiat standard was a very before the digital age, we were paying each other in money, and then the digital age came around, and people started to say, well, let's port fiat onto digits, basically. And so the credit cards came around, and you could pay with not cash, but it was still digits related to cash, and there was this sort of, well, it's digits backed by cash, which supposedly is backed by gold, except that it wasn't. And yeah, ever since we left the gold standard to sort of conform to a little bit more free flowing um, and Wild West form of monetary policy, we really haven't we really haven't stopped to think about, wait a minute, we've digitized cash, we've digitized fiat, but it's really actually doing fiat. Uh, it's almost like you get the benefits of more ease of transaction, because you don't have to ship your actual cash to people to pay for something. But at the same time, we haven't taken full advantage of the new medium of digital infrastructure to actually reformulate the conception of currency itself. And so that's when the transformation actually began. That's when the revolution started, you might
That's
say. They're like, wait a minute,
mhm.
what if we rethought the 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 idea of currency itself to suit the digital age in a way that benefits in all the possible ways that we can?
Mhm,
And so
mhm.
that's really sort of where it came to a head.
Okay. Well, no, absolutely. It's fascinating, and I think we can keep talking more more about the whole economy and how we got to this point and where we're going. Lucas, I definitely first of all want to thank you so much for your time and for like really giving your knowledge of your experience that you have been having this past 3 years or more in this area. And like I think a lot of people are just starting, as we said, like just the Super Bowl. Some people are just clicking and understanding what is the basics of an app, and like from there introducing themselves. So I'm hoping that we can keep doing this type of conversations so we can learning and talking and see what's going on in the world, because I think it's correlated, right, everything. So I just want to ask you one before we leave, if you can tell us, I don't know, a book or something that you could recommend to someone that's just starting, or a YouTuber that were to learn more about crypto and all that, because that's what we're here to teach each other, learn from each other. So if you have anything to say besides that, then we'll close for today.
Yeah, I'm not a prolific book reader myself. Unfortunately, I wish that I was, because there's a lot of great literature out there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a book called The Bitcoin Standard by Safadine Ammous. I hope I'm pronouncing
Mm-hmm.
that correctly. But he's a Lebanese American economist who sort of literally kind of wrote the book on, short of Satoshi himself, wrote the book on Bitcoin, and it's a really great introductory sort of expose on Bitcoin and why it matters. He's a
Mm-hmm.
very eloquent guy, and he's able to sort of break down very complex concepts into an easy to grasp format. I'd say for me, my regular intake for cryptocurrency related content is more YouTube related, is more blog related. I'm usually consuming a lot more of that type of stuff than books. There's I would recommend that people, once you've done the diversification of sort of figuring out what projects are out there and which ones seem to sort of resonate with you, I'd really sort of get plugged into those communities. Their
Mhm.
Discord servers and their websites. They usually have live streams on YouTube, especially if they're some of the bigger projects. Hoskinson does that. Vitalik does that. He's got his blog website. Um, there's all kinds of ways of sort of keeping up to date on the respective projects. I think it's tough because you have to sort of keep one eye on the macro environment and one eye on the specific development of the projects themselves, which can
Mhm.
be tough because you start to get really myopically focused on something like, man, there's so much fundamental development going on in this project. I can't believe it's not mooning. Like
Right.
why is it not absolutely pumping right now? And typically the answer to that is that the macro environment just isn't conducive to that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Lots of times you get people say, man, I can't believe that Ethereum hasn't broken free of Bitcoin's influence. I can't believe everything sort of still moves in tandem. I can't believe that. um, can't believe we haven't already hit 250K by now. I
Right.
think there's a I think there's almost like a spoiled brattiness to the average person that gets into crypto because when times are good, they're really good, and we can get a little bit too accustomed to the idea that I should be making 40% overnight, and that's not
It's
abnormal.
not.
But
It's
the thing
true.
is, Rome wasn't built in a day, and it's worth sort of taking a step back and sort of calming your expectations and
Mhm.
saying, I'm not in it just because of the gains. They're a perk, but they're not the only reason. And to be diligent and disciplined with keeping up with the projects that you're interested in, to make sure that you understand what you're invested in. Rule one of
Mhm.
investing is you have to know what you're invested in. Otherwise, it's just a rug pull and you lose everything. And you're like, well, shoot, I thought it was going to the moon for sure, but
Mhm. Mhm.
if you're not, and that's the risk element of going deeper into some of the smaller cap projects. But if you're able to maintain that sort of generalized outlook on what's happening in the macro environment at the moment that might influence price to go up or down, if you're literate in technical analysis, um, if you're nested in the community of the particular projects that you're invested in, I think that gives you sort of the A to Z of price movement, which isn't to say that you become an oracle that can predict the
All
future
of them. Yeah.
price, but it's as good as you can really possibly do. And it's worth
Exactly.
noting too that if anybody sort of tries to sell you snake oil saying it's going to cure cancer and say that just buy this product, just invest in this coin and you'll be a millionaire overnight, even in crypto, even in crypto, that's probably not true,
It's
right?
crazy.
So
Yeah.
if you're willing to bear the pain, and there are painful days, that's for sure. If you're willing to stick it out, if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to read up, if you're willing to pay the price, and really just hunker down, bear with it during the tough times, and
Patience.
ride it like a bull in the good times. I think it's
Seriously.
it's really it's really rewarding. Again, not only from a returns price perspective, but
Mhm.
from being a part of a much larger movement towards the democratization of finance and a return of power to the people, um, when it comes to their ability to finance the things that they're interested in, to become financially independent themselves, to become literate in all the ways that would make them would empower them to pursue their respective goals. I think it's a really aspirational world, and it
Yes.
doesn't happen overnight, but it's worth aspiring to, and it's worth sticking it out, doing the work, and really trying to prepare yourself to sort of usher in that new age.
Thank you for that talk. I needed for myself, to be honest. Like right now in this whole situation that we're going through, it's like we just need to keep reminding ourselves of all those points that you were pointing out, and being patient. This is what I'm learning the most through crypto. Even you have the expectations, but then you come down to earth again, and it's like, dude, I need to be patient. And that's something
Mhm.
even my parents like, people don't get rich overnight, people don't learn everything overnight. It takes time, so you guys have time. So we're still young, so thanks to that, people that haven't start now, because the time is what is gonna compound, right? That's what you're gonna see, that compound interest. And so thank you, Lucas, for all this time. And then we'll hopefully chat another time. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you.